So in this video, we're going to look at Helmsley Castle history around us, and we're going to talk about how you will be assessed on this topic. So for this topic, it's really important to know the key types of questions that you can be asked on and that they will frame exam questions around. So there are 14 different categories where you can get asked different questions around. So A is the reasons for the location of the site within its surroundings. B is when and why people first created the site. So you'd be talking about Walter Spess in 1120 onwards. C, the ways in which the site has changed over time. D, how the site has been used throughout its history. So you're thinking about domestic, military purpose. You're thinking about heritage purpose, tourism in the 20th century. E is diversity of activities and people associated with the site. So the different types of activities that have taken place on the site, like hunting or things like military activities, for example, but also the diversity of people. So which type of people owned the castle, who worked at the castle, who made use of the castle as well. So diversity is all about similarity and difference, that second order concept. F, the reasons for changes to the site and to the way it was used. So that's very much a causation question. G, significant times in the site's past, peak activity, major developments and turning points. There's only one turning point for our site, which is the English Civil War. H is the significance of specific features in the physical remains at the site. So what are the significance of specific features you can see? So you might talk about the earthworks or the East Tower, or the fact that the Tudor mansion remains, or the fact that you can see the outline of the sort of defensive curtain walls, the remains of the South Barbican, North Barbican, etc. I is the importance of the whole site, either locally or nationally as appropriate. J, the typicality of the site based on the comparison with other similar sites. So you're going to be comparing Helmsley Castle to Pickering Castle, Scarborough Castle and Alnwick Castle. There are 3 case study castles. K, what the site reveals about everyday life, attitudes and values in particular periods of history. L, how the physical remains may prompt questions about the past and how historians frame these as valid historical inquiries. So what kind of questions might you ask when confronted with the site? So for example, why has the East Tower been damaged? Why is it the Tudor mansion remains? Why is it that the castle is in a ruined state, for example? M, how the physical remains can inform artistic reconstructions and other interpretations of the site. And N, the challenges and benefits of studying the historic environment. So one of the challenges we have with Helmsley is that the castle now is very, very different to what it looked like originally. The fact that there's a lack of source evidence from the time of Robert de Mortain. We don't have a lot of source evidence from the time of Walter Spess either, specifically about the castle. So what are the challenges, but also the benefits? So what can we actually learn from Helmsley Castle about the history, both of the local area and also nationally as well? So when you do this exam question, it is a 1-hour paper. There are 3 questions that you are given. Each one is worth 20 marks and SPAG is worth 5 marks. You have to do 2 of these 3 questions in the exam. So you need to think really carefully about your question choice. So you're going to spend half an hour on each of the questions. So you do 2 questions out of 3 and it's a 1-hour paper. And the total mark of the paper is 50 marks. So in terms of tackling this exam question, key expectations for the essay, do a quick plan for the question. You can have a single line introduction that just clarifies the question or identifies what time period or which turning point you're going to be writing about, but it does not need to be a long introduction. And then we're asking you to do 3 examples of sustained explanation linked to second order concepts with site evidence, a clear judgment in a conclusion, and you're going to spend 30 minutes for each question. In terms of the marks, out of 20, 5 marks go for your use of own knowledge, 5 marks are for your use of analysis and explaining using relevant SOC language, and then 10 marks go for your use of source and site evidence. So it's absolutely crucial in this exam to use lots of site evidence, the physical site evidence, what you can learn from looking at the physical remains of the site, what you can learn from any source evidence associated from the site, any archaeological evidence as well. Now, when we're talking about sustained explanation, that means that you're using knowledge, analysis and site evidence in each of your explanations. So that's really, really important to do. So just there in yellow, you can see some useful phrases to really help you to use site evidence within your answers. As usual, you're going to want to use second order concepts within your answer, so making reference to cause and consequence, similarity and difference, significance, and continuity and change. So think about where you can make those really clear links to SOC language within your answers. So we're just going to look at an example answer for a turning point question, just to see about how you can break this question down. So if you've got a question such as choose a turning point in your site's history, explain how and why this changed the importance of the site, either locally or nationally, we would encourage you to do a quick plan of the question. So you want to be looking for 3 key arguments here, and then the conclusion is a clinching argument. Unlike all the other essays that you'll do for your GCSE history, you only need 3 key arguments here. For all the other ones in Making of America, People's Health, Germany, Elizabethans, you of course need 4 key arguments. For this one, you're looking at 3 key arguments. So just remember for this question, the turning point for our site is always the English Civil War. So if you ever get a question that mentions turning point, it's the English Civil War. So you need to assess the impact on the local and national importance of the site. So you're going to think about consequences. You're going to focus on how the site changed. So when you're thinking about change, you need to think about what things were like before and then what things were like after as a result of the turning point. And you need to think about the physical remains. So what kind of site evidence can you actually use to answer this question and include this within your answer? So this would be a suggested structure in terms of approaching this essay. So you could talk about the change in use, so that the fact that the turning point, the English Civil War, shows a change in use at Helmsley Castle from domestic. So largely before the English Civil War, Helmsley Castle's main purpose was domestic. Thinking about things like the Tudor mansion, for example. In fact, there was evidence that not really anyone was really living at Helmsley Castle permanently before the English Civil War. And it brings it into military use. You're then going to think about the short-term significance of the change. So you're going to talk about the slighting of the castle, and then long-term impact in that change of use. So you can make an argument that the reason why Helmsley Castle fell into ruin after, the time of the Civil War, and the reason why it wasn't lived in afterwards, was as a direct result of the fact that the East Tower was slighted, the walls were taken down, and that possibly influenced when the Duncan family came to own the site, that they didn't want to live in the site anymore. So this would be an example answer, and you can pause this and read this yourself, but you can see that I've just color-coded in blue here all the different ways in which you can add in site evidence, and that just really shows you visually how crucial the use of site evidence is. So argument 1 is the change in the use from domestic to military as a result of the English Civil War. So you're thinking about what came before the English Civil War, and then why the actual Civil War itself therefore represents a turning point. Argument 2 is more about the short-term impact, the slighting of the castle. So really thinking about how significant that was at the time, why that's such an almost like overnight turning point, about how dramatic the event would have been within the local area, how important the East Tower is. It's very much the symbol of Helmsley Castle even today. Then argument 3 is about the long-term impact in terms of change of use of the castle. So then you're sort of like thinking about what happened in the years after the English Civil War to really reflect on how this is the great turning point. When you think about turning point, it's a huge change in direction, and we could definitely say the English Civil War is that. You can have a quick clinching argument. So I've just put here in the final analysis, the site evidence visually shows us the impact of the slighting of the East Tower and tells us the story of a dramatic event both locally and nationally in the history of Helmsley Castle. Ultimately, the slighting of the castle caused the castle to fall into ruin and led to a dramatic change in the use of the castle from a military and domestic one to becoming a romantic ruin and subsequently a heritage site. There is no doubt that the dramatic and historic events of 1644 are etched into the story that the site of Helmsley Castle reveals. So just a quick reminder there that in any of these answers to do really, really well, site evidence is going to be absolutely crucial. So that's just helped us to think about what you need to do when you're approaching these exam questions. There's also a walking, talking mock that you can look at in a bit more detail. See that go through in more detail, but that's just a quick reminder. And this slide, of course, that we have a look at as well, just gives you that very quick overview of the different owners of Helmsley Castle, the different purposes through time, the different sort of key stages and links to the sort of history of the time in the story of Helmsley Castle. Thanks very much for listening. Bye-bye.